Hi there, it's Lisa Starr back with another episode of StarrCast, and I'm excited to welcome a very prestigious guest today who straddles both the CPG consumer world and the service world, and he'll tell us more about how that happened. I'd like to welcome David Stoup, who is CEO and chairman of not just one company, but two, because he's that kind of guy, Healthy Lifestyle Brands and Trilogy Spa Holdings, which will be known to many in the spa world. So welcome, David. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Lisa.
So most of us in the spa side, at least, have seen David or his people or his brands around. We know that they run high-end spas. They're a little under the radar and they're like a stealth weapon. So we thought it would be great to hear more about David's story, but more importantly, how he came to be in the position he's in and his journey up from what he wanted to do as a young man. So we'll start there, David. Where did you grow up?
I am a proud middle-class Kansas City boy.
Middle-class Kansas City. So plains, cowboys, railroads, that was your scenery growing up?
It was a Leave It to Beaver time. You know, the hair color probably gives away the fact this wasn't recent news. This was like almost 70 years ago. And, you know, these were great times. And I had wonderful parents and wonderful siblings that I still enjoy in the case of the siblings anyway. And I, grew up having to work, but that was also a blessing. And one of my first jobs was working in the hospital across the street from the high school I attended, cleaning the surgical suites after school and on weekends, and stocking everything that was needed for the next day's procedures. And I fell in love with medicine.
Wow. And that's important work.
Very for a kid, 15, 16, 17 years old. And I thought I was going to be a doctor. But then I found that I really wasn't as good at biochemistry.
That math and chemistry trips everybody up.
As I was at accounting and finance. So in college, that sort of evaporated as a goal. And I probably did what was more expected of me, the son of a lawyer. After graduating from undergrad school, I went on to law school and then practiced law for about 18 months and very predictably didn't like it.
Really? Did you go right from college to law school? That was pretty much what was done back then.
That was what was done at that time.
Right.
And the answer is yes. And at that point, I went to practice primarily with the thought in mind that I was going to find something that I really wanted to do, probably in conjunction with one of my clients. And that is precisely what happened.
Well, how did that happen? I mean, you're a lawyer, you're a fledgling lawyer, you're trying to make your way and you realize it's not really for you. How did this path open up for you?
You might want to ask, but it's a longer story than we have time for, how a Swiss national who owned a federally licensed Swiss hospital not far from Montreux, Switzerland, was looking in Kansas City for an investment opportunity and found his lawyer, and that was me.
Oh,
and
boy.
Together,
a lot of luck.
Together, we founded a brand that I'm proud to say 43 years later is still one of the largest super premium skincare brands in the world, Prairie.
So maybe that was one of my questions, is where did that name come from? It's because the Prairie was around you?
I wish I could have said that. The genesis of that was really in Switzerland, and it was about the prairies there. And that has been a world famous medical institution since the 1930s, doing at that time crude stem cell therapy, but doing it on the most interesting people, kings and queens and popes and movie stars.
So this was happening with this Swiss investor, and he meets you, the young Prairie lawyer. And then how did you get involved with the company?
Well, the fellow who owned the hospital said, I saw people rubbing this burn ointment that we've created on their faces, and it's really not very much like a skincare product. How about starting a skincare company for me? And I said, well, I'm a lawyer and I don't know anything about this business. And, with that full disclosure, he nonetheless said, you'll learn. And I did. and
That's amazing.
founded with him the La Prairie brand. And like I said, 43 years later, it's still probably the biggest brand at Saks or Neiman Marcus still today.
No, I just received some samples from a Waldorf, I think. So obviously still out there. So did you move from Kansas City at some point during this La Prairie growth?
Well, we sold La Prairie, and I started another company, in this case, a hair care company with a trichologist by the name of Philip Kingsley, hair products, efficacious hair products, that we subsequently sold to Elizabeth Arden, and that caused me to move to New York. And I stayed in New York and did a leveraged buyout on a beauty company. And this is where the turning point was, where I turned from the CPG industry, which is what Kingsley and La Prairie were, and into the service business when I had spas and salons in about 700 locations throughout North America.
So did you work for Unilever at any point?
I did not. I went to Unilever, and that becomes another chapter of the story. After that first company was sold to a strategic buyer, and I actually left the industry for a while, found I missed it, and then came back when I heard from the Unilever people who owned the Elizabeth Arden business that they were going to close the famous Red Door. They had actually presided over the empire going from 160 units when Miss Arden died back in the 60s to 2. And they were going to close the last 2 units in 1991 when they approached me. It was an interesting day because they said, "How much will you pay?" And I said, "How much will you give me to take it?"
Exactly. No, that's the wrong question, right?
and we made a bargain, and it worked out for everybody. And
well,
we built it back to where it was.
You took the 2. You took ownership of the 2, which were in New York and where was
Chevy
it?
Chase, Maryland.
Okay, Chevy Chase, Maryland. And then how long did it take you to build that back up, and what was the trajectory of that?
9 years. There were some acquisitions along the way, and we ended up with over 150 units.
And this was in the 90s then?
This was in the 90s. That took from 92 until, call it, 2000.
So would you say that you were in the right place at the right time when spa was just becoming a hot topic, or was there more to it?
I would say that I had real advantages because day spas were coming into their own. And we saw the benefit, economically speaking, and from a service perspective, of clustering units. So actually, Chicago was a great example where we had acquired a business, Mario Tricoci, a wonderful operator, the best in the business. And we had our own Red Doors, and between the two, we were doing over $100 million worth of business in the city of Chicago, incredibly profitably as a result of being able to amortize certain fixed costs. So we were in the right place at the right time with the right product. We had great products.
I'm interested in that Mario Tricoci acquisition because we have seen in spa classically that mixing in the salon side can be a challenge. And that's what they were predominantly, of course, really a big hair business with a good spa, and what they had, I don't know, 12, 15 locations in Chicago.
More like 17, but
17.
Yeah.
Okay. So how did those two meld for you and the company, the hair and the spa side?
Well, I don't think that they're executed different, but they're compatible. In fact, if anything, I think spa, as it's generally been known and defined, is more of a discretionary business where you get your hair cut and colored on a routine basis. So the frequency of bringing a customer in helped the spa side, and the uniqueness of being one-stop shopping, because we were serving a businesswoman aged 35 to 50 typically, who didn't have time to go from here to there to someplace else. She wanted it in one place.
And that's so true. It was so popular in the 90s in particular to be able to get everything done in one place. And it's great when you know that you can define your audience that specifically, then you can really put your marketing behind that. So what happened as we got into the 2000s?
As we got into the 2000s, I took a bit of a break again, as I sell projects. They're like, leaving your kids or sending your kids off to college. I have no children, but I can only imagine what that's like. And you slow down and you begin to reconsider, what do I want to do next? And, in this case, I said to myself after a little bit of a self-examination, I really want to go back to the CPG world, and in this case, help a guy that I admire greatly. And that was Andrew Weil, the famous Harvard-trained MD, the father of wellness, the guy who's appeared twice on the cover of Time magazine. Mm-hmm. And 40 years ago, when he graduated from Harvard Medical School, he said things like nutrition was a cornerstone of good health, and was literally drummed out of the Corps for saying such a radical thing.
How did you connect with him? How did your paths cross?
I belong to an organization known as YPO. Mm-hmm. I'm not Y anymore, right? But you get the point. You stay in your entire life, and a number of us had been trying to help Andy with his true legacy, his School for Integrative Medicine at the University of Arizona, training physicians who were already licensed to learn the things that they should have learned in medical school about nutrition and the like, and didn't. And that was business, or that, that work was really falling on hard times because states were out of money. And we were trying to help him. And then we said, very smart partner of mine by the name of Carl Eller said, Andy, let's make a business out of this. And we started a company we then called Weil Lifestyle. Mm-hmm. And that was all around taking things that Andy could really believe in, putting his name to them, and creating great consumer health and wellness products. And he would, say what he had to say to make people understand why they were different and better. And probably the best example of that is the Origins skincare line known as Dr. Andrew Weil for Origins, which I'm proud to say here again, 16 years later is a leader in this category.
Mm-hmm. So you were able to see the effect of the sort of service and lifestyle enhancement on the business as well. I mean, you'd been running spas at that time, but did this sort of show you the potential in moving forward?
It did. And it led me perhaps in a slightly different direction than I had taken at Elizabeth Arden, because those were all street level salons and spas. And now I was more interested in the hospitality side of the business, which is something I dabbled in at Arden, but really came to life in the days when we were building what I've called Trilogy Spa Holdings, which is a collection of typically 5-star, some 4-star, some resorts, oftentimes urban resorts. The Fairmont Scottsdale Princess would be an example of one that's been highly successful for us, but so was the flagship Waldorf Astoria in New York City on Park Avenue. And I'm proud to say that we're in the process of having designed the new Waldorf Spa and Fitness Center, and now we're going to recruit the right partners because we believe in brands, and then we will operate the unit when it opens in late 22, early 23.
Okay. So tell me when Trilogy started and where did the name come from?
Well, there's a lot of words on anyone's resume when they get to the stage of life as I have. And yet at the same time, for all the good things that I have had great fortune in taking on, most of which have been pretty successful, some of which haven't been. That's life. There were 3 standouts, and we anticipate this Trilogy will be the third of those three after La Prairie and Elizabeth Arden.
Mm-hmm. So it was a little bit of forward thinking at the
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
Good for you. Well, hey,
And
positive reinforcement, right? So
you got to
win
start with a goal.
You do, and it has to make sense. So between running the Trilogy spas and your start at Elizabeth Arden Tricoci, how has the industry changed, David? You've been around for this tremendous ride of attention spas have gotten. What have you seen the big changes in the last 20 years?
Well, let me tip my hat to my partner, Mario Tricoci, and my friend, because he taught me something that was incredibly important and probably drew me to this industry again. And that was, he said to me, David, if you do something you truly love, you'll be very good at it. Now, he wasn't necessarily directing that advice to me, but anyone.
Sure.
And if you're doing something you love, you'll do it very well, and the money will come. Look at me. I'm a hairdresser, and we paid him a considerable amount of money to join our team, and worth every dime, by the way. With that in mind, I think we look at the industry going forward as having great opportunities because the people really want to make people healthier and happier. And even before COVID, that was something that I know personally drew me back to the industry a couple of times. I had the opportunity to work with people who really loved what they did. A lot of architects and accountants and lawyers don't necessarily love what they do. And, my hairdressers and estheticians and massage therapists and nail techs, they do. So,
great point.
I think there's huge passion. And I think that, when you add that to the fact that I personally, and I believe our entire company, loves to serve. I see people who don't like to serve. They should really be in the CPG industry. They should create things, but that's a very different world than the service industry where, you have to pick up the dishes at the end of the night and make sure that they get washed. You have to, serve others. And some people find that embarrassing. I don't.
So you would espouse a servant leadership approach to a service-led business?
No question. Very different from the CPG industry. And I think the two businesses are classically different because one's a rather fixed cost business, totally dependent upon top line revenue growth and largely done on a promotional basis. And in the case of the service industry, you're really in it for the long term. And it's a variable P&L, and you're in a position where you have to get a guest to come back again and again.
Very different models.
Very different. Believe me, I almost bankrupted my first service business trying to take the lessons of a CPG CEO and apply it to the service business, which did not work.
How long did it take you to realize that the rules were different?
About a year.
About a year. So, coming from that CPG background, and it's a numbers game, right? It's all about, we put out this much, here's our margin, what do we sell? And on the service side, it's about people. And that's so much trickier, to operate. It has higher labor costs. It doesn't have the potential of a brand that, let's say, is in every Target across the country. So I'm interested in what made you want to pursue that after your successes on the CPG side.
Well, first, I don't think that just because you migrate from CPG into service, you have to give a brand.
Noted.
I believe in brands. I think brands can best be defined as a promise that creates a preference. And so if you're really driving loyalty of your consumer, you can best do it with a brand, a well-defined, established brand. And that's why we team up with people like Guerlain, the LVMH company, and Sicily, who I've been competing with since I launched La Prairie at about the same time that they brought Sicily into the United States back in the late 70s. So these are wonderful, well-respected, super premium skincare brands that we use to their benefit and ours to differentiate ourselves from the typical spa. And that makes a big difference. But back to your point, I think people sometimes in our industry think it's profit or purpose. And I don't believe that's a choice.
Or that
you
they're
have
exclusive.
to make.
Right.
Yeah, they are not mutually exclusive at all. And I think people sometimes on the outside looking in think that spas can't be profitable. Well, if you know how to run them, they can be reasonably profitable, but you have to think of them as a bond return and not necessarily a hockey stick classic CPG success where you're going to get exponential growth. They don't go up quickly and they don't go down quickly. And that's an advantage and a bit of a limitation. You got to understand that. But, to a hotel, which is where I found myself migrating in the Trilogy days, there were all sorts of reasons to do those sorts of businesses. Number one, Forbes says if you're a 5-star, you have to have a spa. But beyond that, we can positively impact rate and occupancy of the room product, which is where they make all their money, and influence the loyalty of the consumer, because now, particularly with fitness centers being in such hot demand, I go to hotels where I find myself with a great fitness center and an occasional opportunity to use the spa.
No, you're right. They support each other. It is, and each is better with the other, I believe.
Yeah, and you can create very different products in areas where a lot of hoteliers have never thought to go. They've typically run a cocktail party for a corporate client, and they'll, push too many alcoholic beverages and fattening food. Well, we might take the view that let's get the chef in and teach in a demonstration kitchen people how to buy the right foods and then prepare it in a healthy way.
I love that.
We would teach them how to engage in maybe not the more standard forms of yoga, but something like aerial yoga that can be done by virtually anybody. We're going to bring people in to the corporate opportunity in a healthy way as opposed to the typical way. And that's a real advantage to a hotelier.
Well, you touch people on more levels. I mean, in a CPG environment, you have the 30 seconds they look at your brand on the shelf. And in the spa, maybe we have an hour or two. But in a hospitality environment, you have 24 hours or more to touch that guest in multiple ways.
And think about it, Lisa. Look at the percentage of sales of any given skincare brand or cosmetics brand, whatever the category, that are sold in stores versus online today versus what it was 18 months ago. I mean, they're typically double and approaching 50% of total sales.
Right.
And so there's a huge need for the intimacy that comes along with being able to lay hands on the consumer as we do in a spa. But that also causes one of the unique difficulties or challenges, I'd call it, in doing spa work. We are the most intimate part of hospitality. We ask people to come into a room, we shut the door, we ask them to take their clothes off, and then we lay our hands on them. Now, this is something,
1 minute.
This is something that most hoteliers try very hard to avoid.
Right.
And we, on the other hand, have the opportunity to charge $3 to $4 a minute for the privilege. So executed properly, that is the way to ensure long-term loyalty among brand advocates or brand consumers, because they're not just hearing it over a Zoom call. They're hearing, or even over the counter, they're actually having somebody knowledgeable lay hands on.
And when you have that interaction that is knowledgeable and efficacious, but also rewarding for an hour, you really touch that person in a very deep way, much more than a product on the shelf can.
And that's what brought me back to the industry again and again. If you can go to work every day and you can make people healthy and happy, and you get to work with people that are truly loving what they do, and you're in a position where you can serve and you like to serve, as I do, then you're in heaven. That was not the practice of law.
So you never look back and regret that decision, obviously.
I never regretted leaving the practice. I never regretted going to law school. I use what I learned every single day since then. And so my lawyers tell me I'm a pretty good manager of lawyers because I understand the issues.
And I guess in any big company today, you need to be a good manager of lawyers.
You have to be your own best advocate. Let's put it that way.
So how many spas does Trilogy operate right now, David?
We're operating in about 17 different locations. Some of them are, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, how do you see that evolving given COVID, as we touched on it? Have you thought about how you might evolve or change that model going forward?
I think that there are opportunities both in expanding where we've been and going in a slightly new direction. As COVID hit and staffs were slashed, some of the hardest hit were some of the spa, divisions of the big hotel companies. And as they become more franchise oriented as opposed to managed, I think that you won't see those staffs go back to where they were. And they were already running a ratio of about one person per every 50 hotels. And that really wasn't enough to help the spa director understand what they had to do. We, by contrast, have a person in home office for every unit that we have out in the field.
Wow, that's
impressive. Against those kind of odds, there's not much question why we'll outperform.
So you've got 17 people taking care of 17 spas. That is far beyond the ratio of any of the larger brands, for sure.
Yeah, and we do that for a specific purpose, because we think that for too long, the spa directors have been frustrated and taken advantage of in some respects by the fact that they were asked to be jacks of all trades. Indeed. First of all, you've never heard of a GM coming by way of the spa director's position.
Yes.
So typical GM doesn't know much about the spa. They may be interested. Some are afraid, but
many are afraid, but some are interested.
But they don't know much. So what is that spa director left to do? Figure it out him or herself. And that's oftentimes not just running the spa on a day-to-day, but doing the maintenance and the human resources and the accounting and the marketing. We take all the rest of that, other than the guest experience, and bring it back to home office. So all the marketing is centralized, all the maintenance is centralized, all the human resources is centralized, even the recruiting is centralized. And then we're in a position to really focus the spa director on what's important.
Sure, you can receive the economies of scale, and they can focus on growing the business and their real core strengths, and not being a janitor and a marketing expert at the same time.
It's not, and it's just too much to ask of anybody to be good at all those things.
Well, we always laugh that spa directors wear more different hats than anybody else in hospitality or many jobs, frankly. I mean, even a standalone day spa. I mean, the director has quite a broad skill set to be successful.
I agree.
So in closing, David, do you see COVID as an opportunity for the spa industry? And if so, how?
I don't think that there's any question but that wellness, broadly defined, is more important today than it was 18 months ago. What was a fad at one point in time became a lifestyle choice, and today is a practical necessity. And so I see an upward curve, going the right direction for demand from consumers. Tragically, we have lost a fair number of people in our industry that in many cases will not be able to return to the industry.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that worries me greatly. That's both owners of spas as well as employees who work within spas. But generally, I think that the opportunity is greater today than it was pre-COVID, because there's much more of a focus on the things that my partner, Andy Weil, would tell you are important as the four cornerstones of good health.
Mm-hmm.
Eat right, sleep right, exercise right, and keep stress out of your life. And if you do those four things, you find yourself in a position where you can pretty much prevent most illnesses. And that's his whole thing about integrative medicine.
Well, we certainly have the attention of consumers in a way that we really never did. I mean, we've all been preaching taking care of yourself, but now they've taken a note and they are listening. And the spas that we're seeing open are, flooded. I mean, they're handling as many appointments as they possibly can, given the staffing shortages.
I would tell you our average spa today is running 20% above 2019 numbers. And they are running as much as 50% over 2019 numbers. If you're running 2019 numbers, you're behind the game.
Mm-hmm. Well said. Well, David Stoup of Trilogy and Healthy Lifestyle Brands, thank you so much for joining us. And we look forward to seeing how Trilogy continues as you take over in another aspect of spa and wellness. Thank you so much for joining us.
It was my pleasure, Lisa.